Hi, this is Dr. Sabine Hazen, live from Ventura Clinical Trials. We are here with Dan, who was here yesterday,
Yes.
and then Dr. Drew. And Dr. Drew is a nutritionist in Woodland Hills.
Woodland Hills, California, yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a clinical nutritionist for the last 15 years. Prior to that, background was industrial engineering from Stanford and with a business degree from Pepperdine. Many years ago, decided that my personal interest in nutrition was kind of a guiding factor. I went to sell supplements in Europe when I was young because I thought there was a great need for supplements that wasn't really being served. And now I really work on helping people solve complicated issues in combination with their doctors. And specifically, you're talking today about ulcerative colitis. It's very important with people that are suffering from this that they really understand how food and their choice of food and beverages affects this tremendously. And so that's really what I do in my practice is I understand what they've done in the past, how they've helped their colitis. We discuss what can improve their health, and that is obviously from a nutritional standpoint and an actual caloric standpoint. I have to look at where they're at with other health issues. And it's a combination of putting those things together that build a more, I would say, anti-inflammatory environment that can help them heal.
You see,
And
this
so-
would be a good source for the study.
Yeah,
we're
so,
working on.
and by the way, I forgot to introduce Chris.
Chris Hubbard.
That's okay.
Chris,
Always here.
thank you for being here
You're
and
welcome.
coming all the way. I saw the car karaoke yesterday with Dan on the podcast on
It was
LinkedIn.
great too, right?
It was great, but he didn't sing. I wanted him to sing like James Corden.
You sing for me all
the
the
But
shower,
you
time.
did
in the
look.
shower.
No, no.
You
You sing
did
in the
have that
office all the
presence.
time.
I do sing when I'm bored.
No,
All
but you
the
did
time.
have that presence talking with your intern. It was very.
We
You
shoot
caught me. I
content.
started watching the.
Content creation is very important. The person we met yesterday got her job. She's a PhD. She got her
Right.
job because of Facebook, and she's
And
a vice president
she's-
of a drug company.
Right. She worked as a lab scientist, developed the product, and actually the product that we're working on.
Yeah.
So ulcerative colitis, I've done a lot of clinical trials on ulcerative colitis because there's not that many drugs that have been working so great for some patients. And we were just talking about your patient that has like a narrow anal canal. And so there's nothing really for that patient, right? So you have to almost go into the clinical trial formulation for this and when you look at the clinical trial formulation, unfortunately right now, so many companies are just mimicking, right? It's all biologics after biologics. So company number one is doing a biologic. Company number two is biologic. So you don't really have a lot of options for these patients. What's interesting about the Korean company that we're working on, so he's my monitor.
Number one. Yeah.
And Dan has a huge presence on LinkedIn because he does these podcasts. And so we're showing that, there is a role for educating people on a podcast. So ulcerative colitis study that he brought me from Korea is actually not a biologic. And it was fabricated, or the concept of it and the experiment was done by this PhD, who the CEO of this company found her on Facebook, hired her as the vice president, and now she's so excited to see how my patients are doing on her product. And
Genuinely, interested.
yeah,
you don't
she
see
is.
that from the
So-
big companies.
But because this is kind of her baby, right?
Yes.
This was her thought process. She developed the concept. Could you imagine, you figure out that red yeast rice is helping cholesterol, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, let me test it on my patients, and all of a sudden the cholesterol drops, and you're like, wow, I'm a genius. Let me see it in a clinical trial. And then you bring the patient. So it's exciting, I think, for the doctor or the person that's behind the experiment to see the experiment coming into fruition.
Yeah, and then nutrition. Do you have any nutrition advice for people with UC? Maybe any tips?
Well, the most important thing I want people to understand is usually by the time a client gets to me, they've been suffering with this disorder for many years. And it's kind of a hidden secret. And they haven't even prepared their family and friends for what that really indicates, what it means. But obviously, when we consider the quality of food, when we consider what I call the inflammation index, which is food that easily digests or digests too quickly, and brings a lot of caloric content to the table. So these would be obviously what we think about from our pastas to our bread to to our more dessert pastry items and the obviously carbonated beverages that are full of sugars and fructose and things like that. Those are really impossible items for these people to eat. But yet, if the people, family and friends don't truly understand their disorder, those are the only items that are being provided for them when they eat at events and social things, and the 4th of July recently. And so what happens is, as that commercial you see where the person runs into the bathroom and the person goes, where's Grandpa? These diseases are kind of, they're very intimate. And so by the time the person gets to me, they've already adapted their life to the disorder, but no one's been around them adapting to them in a good way to support them. So I just think it's very important so once they understand that, I ask them to chat with those people so that we make sure that it's a combined effort to help them. And I think the other thing that's important is I believe that there is a solution that can come or an improvement that can come. And they're usually in a holding pattern where things are always just getting worse from stress and other issues. So if they can see that there's a potential to get better, it's much better for their mental image to understand, because they're not opening up about this disorder, and maybe to a healthcare practitioner, that's fine, but they don't open up to the world. So they've changed all these things. They don't go to parties. They make their social affairs very short. They don't go to sporting events. They're not going to go hiking. They're not going to go mountain climbing. One of the clients I have is a surfer, and his events can happen to him at any time. And so it's important that they realize that if everyone makes a great effort, they can get some normality. And the normality is really what they're looking for. The other thing that's important to realize is some people with ulcerative colitis, they're fatigued all the time. So the doctors are making recommendations that might be fighting the disease or slowing the disease, but the doctors are not making recommendations that are nutritional or food or things that they're missing or that they're losing too quickly. They're not absorbing properly. And those items can make their lifestyle. It's like, in other words, someone with UC might be anemic or maybe become anemic very quickly. If they're female and they're going through a menstrual cycle and they have a heavy bleed, they may become anemic, and 5-6 days later they're fatigued, they're not performing at work, they don't even understand it. So when a practitioner finally tells them, hey, I noticed that your hemoglobin is 11.4, that's not very good, and you kind of tell me you're athletic. So I think the overall picture is not just to focus on specifically, hey, you have UC, you've been diagnosed with UC. It's like, hey, what's going on with your vitamin D level? What's fat soluble, your fish oil levels, things that can be measured. And oh my gosh, you mean you eat fish regularly, but we can't find any DHA or EPA omega-3s in your system? Obviously, you're either using them or you're not absorbing them properly. So fine-tuning their nutritional health improves their mood, improves their energy. In a sense, it may not be the absolute solution to the colitis, but it makes life more manageable. And once people have these, what they consider lifelong diseases, they're getting by, and no one even respects the fact that stress damages them. So if a person would know that, maybe they would be treated even a little bit better in a sense, because stress events, lack of sleep, just trying to be a great family member for your friends and family, I got to go to that event. Sometimes you can't go to all those things.
Right.
And I think one important thing for me when I look at, the role of nutrition, because I really believe we are what we eat, but more importantly, we are what we absorb, right? Because I think the most important thing is you can eat it, but if you don't absorb it, it's not really that important, right? But I think when I look at patients with ulcerative colitis, it's important to know that they have a decrease in their microbiome diversity, right?
Yes.
And so that decrease in the microbiome diversity is really what stops them from absorbing certain foods, and therefore you have to adapt the nutrition appropriately to know, they're lacking a certain amount of bacteria, and therefore I have to adjust for that lacking of bacteria, right?
And the bacteria help digest and give them, in a sense, the B vitamins from the food, things that they can't naturally do on their own. So that synergy that is nature has blessed us with is missing in that condition. And so it means that even with treatment medically, they're progressively getting less
Right.
of everything.
Now, there's got to be a lot of people living with this that don't even know they have it, right?
With ulcerative colitis, I mean, it's
Or you'll know. Like, what are the signs?
Rectal bleed, diarrhea. I mean, they usually see the doctor.
So they
I
get
think, I
diagnosed
think the
quickly.
problem with ulcerative colitis is it ulcerative colitis or is it Crohn's? Because the two of them are similar. I think what happens is too often there's also infectious colitis. So sometimes it's an infection, but we don't know how to we didn't diagnose it properly. And then people get put into that closet or that term of ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. And therefore things can get missed. But I think ulcerative colitis, and you see patients just like me, it's on the rise, I think. I think we see a lot more inflammatory bowel disease. I mean, we were at DDW together. I saw a doctor from China who does 1,000 fecal transplant for ulcerative colitis a year. I mean, I didn't even know they had ulcerative colitis in China. So something is off, and I think that's all comes from nutrition.
I mean, I think the quality of food, and we can go through the thing of saying that the food, has been alterated and has herbicides.
Yeah, now they have
and
KFC
pesticides.
in China.
And I think also, don't you think like the whole globalization is affecting all these countries? Like, I personally think like people from Mexico are not eating Japanese food from Japan. You can have a kiwi any time of the year. You can have a banana any time of the year from Africa. Well, I'm getting the microbiome from Africa. Is that really good for me?
Completely sterilized off. So,
or exactly.
Yeah,
so then you lose the benefits of the food and you're just eating the sterilization technique. So I think all that plays, I think globalization is a dangerous thing, in my opinion, with all these foods going from all over the place. Because we've lost the uniqueness of the country. We've lost the food.
Well, the seasonality, one thing that I'll tell my clients, and these are the people that come in, obviously they come in to visit me for weight loss, and we'll be chatting. I like people to tell me typically what they eat every day, and we're all creatures of habit. So I don't, people can say, oh, I'm a diverse eater, and if I take you to the same restaurant you're gonna eat the same thing at the same restaurant. If we go 4 times a week, you're gonna eat the same thing 4 times. So your body, whatever you're giving it that's good is great. Whatever you're giving that's bad, it's going to be repetitive. But the one thing I'll always say to people is the way we evolved, and I believe in God and evolution together, the way we evolved is we were never meant to eat fruit 12 months of the year, period.
Right.
Period. Mm-hmm. Okay? So nature and the way animals and bears and all lived was based upon what was available at the time of the year. And seasonality, winter coming, summer prepared people for winter and prepared nature and animals for winter. So if they did the proper thing and they had the proper biological response to make insulin because they ate fruit and they ate a lot of fruit and they had a lot of insulin and they stored up for the winter, they made it through the winter. And genetically, those who maybe gained, let's say they were humans and they gained 20 pounds, they made it. And those humans that were genetically only gained 10 pounds, they didn't make it. And their gene pool didn't spread to the next generation. So it's all together, but we've messed that up with things from Chile, and we get our fruit from all over the world. Not that obviously we love.
We're all guilty.
We're all guilty.
We're
we love
all
it.
eating them.
But what happens is the exposure, the repetitive exposure to whatever we do, is the corrupting element.
Yeah. Wow.
So it just is.
Never even thought about these things.
And I think part of it is probably the bacteria in our gut is craving it to kill us, right?
Well, so that's where the research ties in, right? Like, is there research being done on this, or?
Well, we're doing it. We're starting to do it, but I think I think understanding the beginning of nutrition and going back to understanding nutrition. So my bachelor before medical school was actually a minor in nutrition, and I think that was like one of the big things that pushed me to go into GI is really that understanding. And I think the role of nutrition is not too many doctors utilize nutritionists, right?
Well,
and there should be a lot more.
I mean, the foundation, as we what we're talking about is absorption. So the body is a biochemical machine. And the foundation of the biggest entry into the body is through the digestive tract. So the other entries into the body would be breathing. So obviously we're getting gases and maybe a little dust and pollen and those things. And so we can say they can influence us in a good or bad way. Amount of oxygen, you're on a mountain, less, an influence. But our gut and the way we digest our food is really every piece we get. So that's all the things that are good. I always tell my clients that if you could have ate food that was growing on the side of the Nile 2,000 years ago, that food probably had a nutritional value that was 5 to 10 times what we get now. And so that's such an, things are pretty that we eat, but really they're deficiently,
And that has
defunct.
to do with the soil, right?
The soil and how farmers in Europe, they let certain quadrants of the land lie fallow, for certain years. And that was all a tradition because you get a better crop after so many years. So really what you're doing is you're letting the insect and you're letting the decomposition of the tissues that are above it emanate into the soil and do it. So the Nile, the reason it was known as the breadbasket of the world was because it overflowed with regularity. It had minerals that came from upriver, tremendous amount of different minerals, and it permeated the ground, and it was a big saturation. It wasn't a little flood, it was a big, huge flood. It took weeks and months probably to come down, and then if they planted correctly, incredible stuff grew. And so the laughter is, it's like when people sell their products and they're like, so this is nutritionally the best of the best. I guarantee their stuff was something that we can't even imagine. To have eaten their fruit. That's why people, I guess, thought, well, this is good. So I feel good. Well, of course, I think you probably feel good. It was like a
The
magic.
food. Yeah.
Wow. You guys are geniuses. I mean, we need to create an IP around this.
Well, but
concept.
you know what's so funny is I think in pharmaceutical companies and clinical trials, we're not looking at nutrition, which is kind of funny because they're putting these drugs on the market and they're doing these inclusion-exclusion. And I always, I look at studies on constipation. And I ask them all the time, well, have we looked at is the patient taking aloe vera? Is the patient taking, because then that's something else that changes your drug per se. And so in the pharmaceutical world, there's no trials that I've seen that looks at nutrition or even thinks about incorporating nutrition as part of the medication.
That's because they're treating symptoms, not curing anything.
But I think they need to
Well, and I don't, I completely agree. But what's very sad is, all of us are kind of idealistic. We kind of see that we can help people and we've seen some solutions, so we feel much better. But what happens is, I'll have a lot of people that come in and they want a simple solution and they want a very fast solution. And when I want to kind of learn about them and I want to, they're for weight loss, I go, your digestion's terrible. Something's going on with your gut. Oh no, I'm here for weight loss. And if I just said, well, I have a magic pill back here, and I've
take it.
I tried it on 3 people and it's worked on 2 of them incredibly. I don't know what's in it, but it works. They go, I want it right away.
that pill?
So the patients they're not compliant. They don't really want to know, which I wish they did want to know.
Right.
Because of their health.
Right.
And I think that's part of this issue.
Yeah.
Is we're looking at it from this great overview of seeing success and helping people and listening. And obviously, when you give some meds or you're doing a protocol, the nutrition side is absolute. So, if the person said to the doctor, I know I'm suffering from cancer, I'm going through chemo with you, can I eat M&Ms? A lot of these doctors, they just say, eat what you normally eat, feel good. Whereas we all kind of know deep down that I would imagine if you're suffering from something that's life-threatening,
You want to improve your nutrition.
Dramatic. It's
And they know that when they design these protocols, you see sometimes in the inclusion criteria, the subjects should not change their diet during the study. You see those things written.
But it would seem to me to improve your product better, you should incorporate. So some studies I've seen it where they basically say, and we have to put it in the source document, did doctor discuss diet with patients?
Yeah.
So for example, cholesterol studies, because that plays a role, I think. If you take a medication and you change your diet completely, well, is it the medication that's working or is it that diet, right? So that's why I think pharmaceutical companies don't include dietary changes with their protocol because they really want to see the drug working or not. However, they should do something to better, in other words, put the patient, analyze the protocol properly, analyze the medication, say, what would be the best diet to put these people on to maximize the benefits of the protocol, especially in a cancer patient, and say, well, we suggest, we've researched with a nutritionist like yourself, and say we've researched and we've noticed that if we give you all these foods and the drug, this is what we want you to be on this diet to be part of the clinical trial. So this way it benefits you long term.
If only we can analyze their microbiome.
If only. Well, that's the future. Right?
That's the future.
That's the future.
That's the cure.
If people want to reach you, where do they go?
Drew Prinz, D-R-E-W, last name Prinz, P-R-I-N-Z. You could find me on the internet. Presently, I'm at a location called David Allen Nutrition, located in Woodland Hills, California.
And if you go on his website, by the way, you'll see a lot of celebrities he's taking care of.
Ah, very good.
So he's like the guy for weight loss. Everybody knows him. He's awesome. Thank you for
Good for
coming.
you. Thank you very
And
much.
he's my, I love him because he helps with my patients. And
That's right. It's a good synergy.
We have a great.
And there's a lot we
working
can actually do research in the research world.
We need to get pharmaceutical companies to acknowledge, diet.
And possibly when you have, when you're doing a clinical trial and you have your different groups, group A, group B, group C, and there's different parameters, placebo, whatever. If one of the groups would actually have a nutritional component that there was adherence to, then in the end you could say, group A and B both shared a certain medical side, but group B had the nutritional support, and maybe it would turn out better. So
But that's the studies we're going to be doing on the microbiome.
Yes, we will. And anyone with UC, ulcerative colitis, that wants to do a study.
Yes, Dr. Hazen, Ventura Clinical Trials. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Let me guess.